commerce between North America and Saint-Domingue was thriving in the 18th century, and it's one of the sites of commerce that North American merchants, are eager to take advantage of, and technically not supposed to take advantage of most of the time, right? So this is trading with the French, but there's a whole economy that ties New England and Saint-Domingue together through basically the sale of provisions in return for molasses that's used for rum. And so first of all, there's these economic connections. As the American Revolution sort of gains speed, there's a moment where there's actually a unit of volunteers from Saint-Domingue, mostly free men of color, who fight at the Siege of Savannah, and those experiences become a part of their own biographies, and many of those do end up being important during the Haitian Revolution. So you do have these connections between them. But part of the central difference in some ways between the Haitian Revolution and the American Revolution has to do with the fact that the Haitian Revolution is basically a revolution of the enslaved, right? I mean, others participate, obviously, but at the core, it's that uprising of the slaves and the kind of fight for freedom that really defines what the Haitian Revolution is about. That, of course, is part of the American Revolution, but it happens in a very different way, and partly the demographics are just different and the situation is different. But what's interesting in the case of the Haitian Revolution is that there are inspirations. There are those in Saint-Domingue who are inspired by the American Revolution, but they're basically the planter class. And the planter class is eager for more economic autonomy, for more ability to trade as they see fit, for better economic conditions. And they actually see the American Revolution as an example of basically a planter class that kind of was able to free itself from a metropolitan control. And so there's a bunch of strands of kind of autonomist struggle even before the Haitian Revolution, in which people are sort of looking to the U.S. as a kind of model for how you kind of escape some of the bonds of basically the rules of the imperial economy that they feel disadvantages them. If you look at the Atlantic during this period, North America is actually kind of on the edge of the system, right? It's actually not creating the same density of profits, and it's not receiving the same number of slaves either, because of crop difference, because of the different forms of settlement. There's all kinds of reasons. But the fact is that within both the British and the French Empire, the Caribbean colonies are kind of the economic powerhouses, right? And the result of that is that the slave importation is hugely focused on the Caribbean, many more numbers going there. It's also true that the death rates are much higher in the Caribbean. So you have a massive importation of slaves into Saint-Domingue, but very, very high death rates, right? So that over the course of the 18th century, we're talking about 800,000, perhaps more, brought in. And at the end of that time, you have 500,000 slave population, or less, actually. So the number of deaths are extremely high. And basically, that also creates a demographic reality that's really important during the Haitian Revolution, which is that the majority of people in Haiti in 1804 and in Saint-Domingue in 1791 are African-born, right? These are people who grew up within Africa, who have direct kind of links, personal links, individual links back to the continent. So this is Africa. There's a line John Thornton at one point says, in the 18th century, Africa was not surviving, it was arriving. And in a place like Haiti, that's very, very clear that this is a population in which, you would have heard all kinds of different African languages. There were different religious practices. There was music, culture, political ideologies, religion, so forth. All of that is being kind of present, reformulated. There's arrivals kind of each year. By the time right before the Haitian Revolution, you're getting about 40,000 arrivals a year. So you're talking about massive numbers, and that all shapes the context very much of the revolution. So the first two declarations of independence in the world are the American and the Haitian, right? And these are the first two texts of that type, and yet they couldn't be more different in a sense. They're very different in tone. One crucial difference is that one of them, the American, is written at the beginning of a war, in a sense, and the other is written at the end of a war. And so the Haitian Declaration really carries the marks of this very, very brutal independence war that has just ended, and that really kind of, you can see that kind of the blood that's been spilt and that kind of rage and anger around that whole process really infuses this declaration, which is in some ways as much a declaration of the forceful desire to make sure that slavery never returns, that colonialism never returns to Haiti, the sense that this kind of past has to be almost erased and permanently kind of put behind them. And there's a kind of fieriness to that declaration that has to do, I think, with that. It's also, of course, a declaration that I think that those who issued it knew was going to be greeted with a lot of kind of hesitancy and hostility in the broader world. So Haiti emerges in a very different context than the United States. This is a country that's being founded by ex-slaves who have overthrown their masters. They're speaking to a world in which slavery is everywhere else, basically, is present, right? The United States States. The rest of the empires are all very invested in slavery. So they know that they're, in a sense, facing kind of these huge odds. And so there's a kind of rhetorical sort of exigency of really kind of laying out the case for the barbarianism of the French, the brutality that they've suffered, and their kind of the need, in a sense, for them to create, through violence and through this violent revolution, a new order. The story goes that the night of when this declaration was written, there was a kind of earlier version that had been penned basically based on the American version, and that Dessalines kind of rejected that as being insufficient and not kind of lacking the heat for that particular occasion. And so then we have this other declaration that was written that's very, very different in tone. No countries acknowledge Haiti's independence in 1804. They're kind of looking to the French to await the French acknowledgement. That many countries trade with Haiti and they have economic relations with it anyway, but there's not a political recognition until 1825, when the French essentially kind of forced Haiti to pay reparations, a kind of reparations, or an indemnity is what it is, money that is to go to the French plantation owners who had lost property during the revolution. A very large sum that's kind of levied. The Haitian state can't pay it, and so the French banks actually give them loans to start paying this indemnity. And this indemnity is going to kind of weigh on the Haitian treasury basically all the way through the 19th century. Haiti has this enters into this cycle of debt that we're familiar with today, but extremely early, right? We're talking about 200 years of this kind of cycle of debt that Haiti's gone through, which of course has devastating consequences on the capacity of the state within the country. I think in the broader sense, though, what's interesting is how fundamental Haiti was towards the kind of progress of anti-slavery in the long term. Now, there's debates about immediately what effect it had on British abolition and French abolition and so forth. But there's a way in which the Haitian Revolution had kind of fundamentally changed the conversation in a way that is kind of irreversible. I mean, after the Haitian Revolution, you have kind of established as a very strong argument that there's simply no way to claim universal rights while continuing to maintain slavery. The Haitian revolutionaries had kind of, I think, pushed forward the kind of idea of universalism in a fundamental way. And afterwards, everybody has to kind of reconfigure their arguments in some ways in relationship to that. And they're going to often represent Haiti in either positive or negative ways as part of their own arguments about how slavery should be dealt with. In the United States, that's very much the case. And in fact, Haiti is referred to constantly in the debates about slavery in the United States in the 19th century. So there's a kind of way in which the Haitian Revolution continues to live on in the Americas.